Hi, Heather. Thank you for joining in. And we have a very interesting topic today at hand. Uh, I think it just came up when we were searching about it that the age appropriate accountability with kids. It is something which is less talked about, but something that we all must have felt while dealing with kids. And me myself felt while dealing with my nephews and nieces. But before we jump onto that, I would love to, welcome you to our webinar series, which is around parenting and all. And why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself so that we get to know more about you?
Okay, thank you so much for having me on. I'm excited to be here. My name's Heather Davis. I am a children's book author, a mother of 8 children. I've been a teacher. 6 of my children are adopted, and my 8 children are very, very, very different. And so I've had to be really careful about learning skills, especially to keep them, teach them how to be responsible that translate to a lot of different children with a lot of different types of needs.
No, absolutely. Actually, when you shared with me, uh, I was literally like, to be honest, I had multiple emotions. I was like, first of all, how can she even do this, right? Like, it's such a difficult job in terms of parenting, and handling kids with special needs is definitely must be more challenging. But before jumping on that, I would love to know about your children book, being an author, that experience. How's it that been going?
Oh, I love it. It's great. When my children were little, I read to them all the time. I've always been an avid reader, so it's fun to be able to write my own. And my favorite part of that is reading in schools and having the children interact with me and hearing their questions. And it's been really a wonderful experience.
Okay, so I would say that Heather has been pretty humble in terms of mentioning about it, but her children books have been best selling in various categories, especially on the growth mindset, working together, and accepting people the way they are, and self-esteem. Actually, that was definitely interesting because it's less talked about, the self-esteem part in kids. But would you like to tell us more about your books?
Yeah. So yeah, I don't like to toot my own horn, but they have been bestsellers, and I've won several awards. The the award that means the most to me, I was nominated for, was a Working Together Award, which is in my state, they give to people who are making our state a better place to live for people with disabilities. And that was because of the work I've done through one of my books, Into Justin's World. And so I create books that teach children about growth mindset, how to look at a problem like something we can solve instead of a stumbling block, and like you said, how to work together, how to see the value in people who are different than we are, and how to learn to be be who we are and allow other people to be themselves.
No, actually, I can't agree more. To be honest, previously all the guests we have, when we discuss about parenting from mental health perspective to administrative, all of them have been mentioning about the same fact that when they have to communicate with kids, it was mostly through storytelling. I think
Yes.
storytelling is a very powerful uh, mechanism in which you don't feel intimidated, but also you are able to express your message across with kids. So tell me, like, how did it start? Like, and if you have any impact stories where it has.
Um, yeah, so the first book I wrote, I actually didn't write. It's an American folk story that used to be told a lot in schools, but it was just part of our oral history. It hadn't been actually written down, and my grandfather told it to me when I was 9 years old, and I
Wow.
loved it. And it was a story that meant a lot to me, and we talked about a lot. And so, as an adult, I was just looking to preserve that story. And
Mhm.
then through that experience, kind of got inspired and started writing more. My one of my stories is based on my son who has profound disabilities. He has traumatic
Mhm.
brain injury and autism, and it just shows what the world looks like through his eyes.
No.
And that was a very humbling experience. I almost didn't publish that book because it felt very personal. I wanted to make sure that I told it through his point of view, that I showed who he was in a positive but realistic light, and and the response has been really encouraging.
No, this definitely excites me to go ahead and read about it. Would you like to tell me a little bit more about it? That what was the story? Because it's coming from
Yeah.
your days of your being 9. So,
Okay, so the first story is called I Can Sleep When the Wind Blows.
hmm,
And it's about a boy who goes to work on a farm, and the only thing he says to tell the farmer why he should hire him is, I can sleep when the wind blows. And the farmer looks at him and he thinks he's probably too young and not strong enough to work on the farm. He doesn't understand what he means by I can sleep when the wind blows, but he needs help, so he hires him. And he ends up being a good worker, but it's not until a storm comes that he really realizes
hmm,
that the value is that he prepares every night for a storm. So he can sleep knowing that whatever happens, whatever comes, he's prepared.
hmm, hmm, hmm.
And this story is wonderful because it's just really simple, but it teaches children that by having a plan and being prepared, those things that scare us or make us feel nervous don't have to feel quite so scary.
Hmm. No, wow, that's actually so much true. I think several skills, whether it is sincerity, situation and emotional awareness, and even
Yeah.
empathy, they have a common node, that is accountability. So it was my way of how I want to attach your stories with the topic of discussion today. But
Yeah.
I think most kids and even some grown-ups, like we don't take responsibility for our actions, right?
Yes.
And without accountability in place, it's very easy to blame each other or refuse to follow rules, which one can find unfair, and even find ways to justify the behavior. So so I think let's now delve in into the main topic of discussion that we had in hand. So how to be clear with expectations and setting clear limits. I want to ask this question from you being a mother in the first place, and of course all of the books that you have written must have given you a very wider perspective. So because this is the first question in mind, that how to be clear about expectations and setting up limits with the kids.
Well, so I think something that parents don't really think about is it's really important to use positive language. And when I say that,
Hmm.
I don't mean like be nice. Positive language means you say what you want them to do, not what you don't want them to do. As
Hmm.
parents, we tend to say things like, don't yell, don't run, don't throw your clothes on the floor.
Hmm.
But kids have a really hard time picturing not doing something, and
Hmm.
there it's not intuitive for them to replace that with something positive. And so it's good to start off by saying, put your clothes in the hamper,
Hmm.
walk when you're walking through the house, use your quiet voice, so
Hmm.
that they know what we expect. That just makes it so that they can really understand what we're saying. And then I think understanding where our kids are. I mean, obviously, we're going to have a different expectation for a 2-year-old than we
Yeah.
are for a 10-year-old. But I firmly believe start when they're 2, start when they're little, so
Hmm.
that we're not springing it on them later.
No, I totally agree with you. In fact, when it's about even managing a team at a company, I do see a lot of common things that if I have not been communicating well from the starting, I can't expect things to change overnight. So
Yes.
even whether it's their way of working or way of presenting their ideas or doing things, if I'm not having that, I would say, positive feedback loop starting from the day one, I can't just come and enforce that on day 100, right?
Yeah.
So, uh,
But having said that, if parents are listening and you have a 10-year-old, it's not too late to get started.
of course, yes. How do you say though? Because this is a very common thing. I have my sisters, and it does happen with them that they believe, oh, I didn't do that earlier, so now it's kind of the norm. So how do you set up limits in those case scenarios?
So 6 of my children are adopted, so I didn't have all of my children when they were little.
Yeah.
So I did have to start with some of my children when they were 6 and 7 and 9. And I think it's just important to start small. I started with, can you pick up your socks?
Hmm.
Little things so that they knew I expected them to always have their socks picked up, and then you build on that. I didn't come in and expect the 9-year-old that just came into my home to have the same level of responsibility as my 9-year-old who'd been in my home his whole life.
Hmm.
So I think that you start small and you build no matter what age you're starting with.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Okay, that makes sense because then you definitely are coming from an area of experience with that. And since you brought it up about the responsibility part, so I would love to know. So let's say if some action of the kid, whether it is as simple as breaking a glass vase to having a fight at school or any kind of action that has happened. So how do you ensure that your child takes full responsibility of that? Because accepting is the first part. So what has been your
Yeah.
experience with that?
Well, I think that one thing that's very important is making sure it's safe for them to admit that they've made a mistake.
Hmm.
We don't want our children to be afraid of admitting that they've made a mistake. So it's okay to have consequences, but we want it to be a situation where they have the safety to openly say what they've done. And I think that it helps to model that too as parents.
Hmm.
We're not perfect, we make mistakes. And
Yeah.
so if we can say, man, I really should have started the dishwasher and I didn't,
Hmm.
then they can kind of see that and see that that's okay. And I think that really helps. But I think that just having that open conversation and making sure that they know that what the expectations are, so that
Hmm.
you know so the line shouldn't move all the time.
Yeah.
If they're
Oh,
supposed to
yeah.
take out the garbage, they should always be supposed to take out the garbage, right? Not sometimes it's not a big deal, sometimes it's a big deal.
Yeah. No, actually, I have one interesting story in this scenario. I think parents and teachers, they are more human to the kids now than they were at my time. Like, for example, for me, sometimes expecting very basic things. So all the teachers and my parents used to have a facade in which they was not expressing themselves. So example, if I would see my teacher dancing, like say somewhere out, I used to get shocked because I could never picture her like that, right? Because she was a
Yeah.
figure in front of me in which she sits on that pedestal, which is something else. Same with my parents. I can never imagine my parents crying, right? Because they
Yeah.
just don't show it and I don't expect it. So I think when it comes to the part of taking responsibility, parents nowadays, I do see a lot that they are accepting, okay, I am as human as I can be on a learning phase. And you are right, kids do try to imitate a lot from the parents. So when they see that parents are taking responsibility of things and not shying away from it, they will also definitely start to align with it.
Yeah, and I think that we tend to not want our kids to know all of our responsibilities because we feel like we'll burden them. And we don't need to make them feel guilty, but it's okay for them to know I have to leave at this time because I'm expected to be to work at this time. And that's something I'm responsible for. I have to do these things because it's part of my responsibility. And then they kind of see that as an adult skill rather than something the adults are putting on them. And I think that's when kids really rebel, is when they feel like that it's just something adults are making them do.
Yeah, I know. I think while growing up, we have must have felt the same, that why am I supposed to do this, right? When the parents themselves don't do it, right?
Yeah.
And the most classic example is about lying. I think I used to feel so wrong that I could see that my mom or my dad lying at some situation, to some, let's say, some relative or some neighbor. And at the same time, it was so diabolical because at the time they think you should not lie.
Yeah,
And like,
exactly.
so I think that was definitely, I used to always remember. But okay, what now? Question coming to my mind. It might be like an overlap to our previous discussion, but ensuring that a child take responsibility of their actions is one part. But how can you get your child to think about the responsibility even before taking the action? So I am referring about self-awareness. See, I think it took a long time for me to start evaluating my risk and my pros and cons as a kind of thing, and then taking decisions. So it was much more informed. But if we want to develop that kind of behavior in a middle school kid, right, or let's say early
Yeah.
teenage kids, so how do you do that?
So I think one thing to really be aware of is that's not just inborn. That's not, especially with, children that have ADHD or are neurodiverse in any way, but with anybody, that's not something that's just inborn. So modeling is good, but practicing with them, sitting down at the beginning of the week and saying, okay, let's talk about these things that might come up. What do you think might happen if you do this? You know, and we've done that with our kids. Take something simple like curfew. Okay, you're going to be
Yeah.
going to a party on Friday. I know that the party's not going to get done till 11:30. If you stay late and you're talking with friends, you're going to be late for curfew. That's going to mean you can't go out Saturday night. So, start saying your goodbyes maybe before 11:30 so you can make sure to get home. But just kind of talking through it with them so that they can, because they don't necessarily see the consequences, and kind of helping them to see that. And that also helps them to see you as a partner and not just an enforcer.
Mm. No, actually, this definitely relates to me a lot of micromanagement. So you can't expect, kids to just learn something by themselves. You have to do a lot of hand holding, and though that's the most irritating part as well sometimes, when you have to literally explain everything piece by piece and can't expect things to come naturally to them, right?
Yeah, and if you start when they're young, it's definitely a lot easier, but and it's a skill they can get. But I think we just kind of expect them to naturally have some of these skills, and then we get frustrated when they don't.
Mm.
But teaching it to them, and then when they do make mistakes. My latest book was Jake the Ape Makes a Lot of Mistakes, and it just kind of talks about how that's how we learn, right? It's not the end of the world. Okay, you should have done this. Like, I have a daughter who went to a party, and they were drinking,
Mm-hmm.
and she called me. Okay, we went and picked her up. Okay, this isn't what we want you to do. Let's talk about how you can not make this choice next time.
Mm-hmm.
um and there are consequences around that. Okay, we're probably not going to have you go to out with this friend for a little while, but making sure that each mistake is a learning opportunity too. So
Mm.
that, because if you treat mistakes as like defining moments, then all that teaches our kids is how to hide their mistakes.
Yeah.
And that's the opposite of what we're looking for when we're trying to teach them responsibility.
Mm-hmm.
Which doesn't mean we have to tell them it's totally okay to make bad choices, but just teaching them how to learn from it. Okay, so here's what the consequences are going to be. Here's how you cannot repeat this next time.
Mm.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry.
Oh, I was just going to say, they only have us there for a short time as their safety net. We want to
Mm.
make sure we give them as many tools as we can for when we're not there.
No, I agree. I think that's a very important lens to have when you are especially parenting, that you want to let them fly by themselves after a certain age, and you can't be there forever.
Yeah.
So, and that definitely gives you more motivations to go ahead even in those hard moments. And yeah, it must have been the reason with you as well.
Yeah, it's and I mean, don't get me wrong, my children are not perfect,
Mm-hmm.
but they have learned that if they make poor choices that are going to hurt themselves or hurt their future, isn't that what we all hate as parents, is when our children make choices that are going to hurt their future?
Yeah.
um, that they can talk to me and we can try to come up with a plan, and
Mm-hmm.
we can work it out. And I think that goes a long way in teaching them responsibility.
Yeah.
um, but when they're little, I mean, we had a simple rule. For example, whenever our family would go to a party, at the end, when we were getting ready to leave, I would say, okay, Davis kids, everybody 10 things. And my
Mm-hmm.
kids knew it was their job to run around and pick up or put away each of them 10 things. It was just a little
Mm.
thing, but we had 8 kids, so that's 80 things getting put away, and it was really helpful. But just something simple that they knew, even if I didn't say anything. And they'll tell me, even now as adults, they have a hard time leaving a party
Mm-hmm.
without helping to clean up,
Yeah.
because that's something that they were taught from a young age.
Yeah, true. Um, Now this definitely takes me another important question that I have, though I know the answer, but I don't agree with the answer. So, okay, I'm setting a
Okay.
precedent, right? So, a lot of times the age appropriate accountability, it comes a lot from the, as a parent, what you see around. So you can't avoid that feeling of comparing when you see the other kids being more responsible, more calm, more uh, mature at handling situations, and you just can't avoid yourself. Though you know that you should not compare your kids, you should know, everyone has their own learning cycle and all, but you simply cannot ignore that fact that they are better than mine. So at that moment of time, of course, you will not bring it up in front of your kids. But how do you manage your emotions in those scenarios?
Yeah, I mean, that can be really, really hard. And I didn't really mention it, but in my family, we have IQs from 35, which is profoundly disabled, to 172, which is profoundly gifted, and
Mm-hmm.
every step in between. So we have a lot of different levels. And so for me, it was not comparing my children with each other. Um, but I learned to help my kids to be appropriate in their way. I have a daughter who has significant mental health issues from the time she was very little. She had PTSD, and she needed to scream. Screaming was her body. She had to get it out, but it wasn't okay to do it in public, and it wasn't okay to do it at home because the rest of us didn't want to hear it. So I made her a very comfortable screaming spot in the
Hmm.
laundry room. It had a beanbag chair. It had toys. It had snacks. It had a blanket. And if she needed to scream, she could go there. And at first, I would say, "Okay, let's go in there." And she could always leave when she was ready. But then, as she got older, she didn't stop screaming, but she learned where to go when she needed to scream. So I think helping our kids to be able to be appropriate in the way that works for them. If they can't, if they can't do it the way everybody else is doing it, then that helps a lot too.
That's definitely very brave of you and to accommodate all these things. But I would love to know, in your understanding, in your perspective, what is the meaning of SEL to you? I know there are tons of words to mention the same skills, whether it's future ready skills, whether it's job ready skills, soft skills, 21st century skills. So there are multiple names of the same thing. But what's your perspective of understanding these things?
So for me, I think it just means understanding our own emotions, other people's emotions, and how we can coexist with other people in our society.
Hmm.
um, I think, and this might be an unpopular opinion, but I think that there's a lot of pressure out there to say, I am who I am, and I'm going to do,
Yeah.
what I want to do. but we also need to learn how to be aware of other people and how to, yeah, exactly, to show empathy for the people around us. Um, and again, that's not necessarily something that's really easy, especially like for a middle schooler.
Yeah.
Man, in middle school, those kids are all so insecure and they're so caught up in all of the things they're worried about. Do I fit in? Am I good enough? That they almost don't have the energy to think about anybody else. And so helping them to understand those SEL skills, that it's really, really valuable.
Hmm. No, that's definitely true. There are a lot of insecurities creeping in that middle school, and the first thing is to have the feeling of being belonged. I
Yeah.
think a lot of kids that we work with, they always love to the fact that can they be up to feel just belonged, and if they do that, then we can expect a lot of things like empathy and coexisting coming into picture. Uh, but there is a lot of debate happening, as you said, right now in the US itself. Um, Literally, I never knew that SEL can be under fire as a
Yeah.
topic. But having this empathy and coexisting itself is considered right now by a lot of parents in a way they don't want their kids to be grown. What do you have to say about that? Like, I am, of course, I stand my stand very clearly, but would love to know your stand.
So I think that people who don't want their kids to learn this don't understand what it is.
Yeah.
Because having good social emotional intelligence doesn't mean denying who you are. It
Hmm.
doesn't mean giving up what makes you unique and special.
Yeah.
It means being able to work together and be empathetic of the people around you. And
Hmm.
and why would we not want our children to have that?
I was coming to that part of the debate, that it is definitely considered that it's kind of a political situation where you are seeding the root of liberalism at a very early stage. And
Yeah.
I never thought it to that extent, but when I started hearing it, I was like, those people would never had been the users of such things in the first
Yeah.
place. So it's okay, but it is important. The best part for me was that this discussion was coming up, even though there's a divide in the society. It's okay because at least this discussion is happening, so people are gonna
Yeah.
take their stand more clearly, uh, rather than being neutral or ignorant to it. So I was like, great, this discussion is happening. So good for
Yeah. And
everyone.
and and I think that people who really understand what social and emotional intelligence is are all for it.
Yeah,
Um, yeah.
I totally agree with you. Uh, so absolutely, I think those were the major points that I had in mind. Would love to know if you wanna tell us anything else that in this topic that we might have not covered.
Um, well, I would just say I know I have a brother who believes that holding his kids responsible or giving them responsibilities in the home is mean,
Okay.
um, and unkind to them, which was surprising to me. But I've really found, again, I have 8 children who are very, very, very different from one another, that it's actually the other way around. It's unkind not to give our children responsibility and teach them that we're going to hold them responsible, because they need to know, they need to know where the lines are. They need to know what's expected so that they can feel safe and secure.
Hmm.
And so if we want our children to feel safe, we have to teach them where the lines are. We have to teach them what's expected. That's the kind thing to do.
Yep. And that's definitely a good point. Would you like to tell us any news story that you're coming up with?
Yeah, so my most recent story, which is going to be coming out next month, it's the second in my Mindset School series, and it's called Freddie the Fox Will Not
Mhm.
Share His Thoughts. And
Okay. Nice title for sure.
it's just talks about this cute little fox who's really doesn't like to say what he wants. He won't tell his mom what he wants in his oatmeal. He doesn't want to tell his friends what he wants to do when they're playing together. He won't answer questions in school. And then through the story, he practices and he learns how to use his voice, how to say what he wants, how to ask for things that he needs. And by doing that, he's able to be a better citizen in this school, and to be someone that his friends want to spend more time with. And so it's a cute, light, easy read, and I'm excited about it.
Wow, no, I'm looking forward to it actually a lot, with the with the pre-test that you have just set. And what's the age bracket that you usually target for with your
I usually target 4 to 8 years old, but a 9-year-old would be great. I have an amazing illustrator who does a really good job, and in those it's really fun because she hides a little snail in each of the pictures, so the kids love to find the snail. And the snail actually is social emotional. Snails in literature stand for constant slow progress towards the goal, working hard and being around other people.
Oh,
so
I never thought it like that, but definitely looking forward to it. And thank you, Heather, for this I think sweet and quick discussion about such a topic which is less talked about. And I would love if to ask Vivek and Matt if they have any questions that they would like to ask Heather or me.
So
I don't have any.
Oh yeah, go
Go
ahead.
Okay,
Go ahead.
So what I was going to say was I don't have any questions, but I just wanted to say that this was fantastic. I completely resonated with many of the points that you made. And I am looking forward to not just reading these, but getting my 6 and 9-year-olds to read this. So thank you for this.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Vivek. How about you, Matt?
Same thing, Heather. As a parent, as I'm going to go back and have to listen to all this because I missed the very beginning. But the thing that was resonating with me was you model accountability and you let your child make mistakes with safe guardrails, so they have a grid, so they see, oh, here's a mature person that's being responsible and they're communicating to me why, instead of, listen kid, I got to go to work, I know this hurts your feelings, but I gotta go. Say, hey, my responsibility as a parent is to provide for our family. So they have that grid. They go, oh, that's a grid I want. So it blew me away. Thank you. You have started my mind, Heather, and I will read both of your books.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. And yeah, you're absolutely right about that modeling. Yeah.
Perfect. Guys, I've also shared the link of Heather's helpfulstories.com. So feel free to go and look at the stories that she is presenting over there. So perfect, guys. I think that's a wrap for today. And I definitely will share the recorded sessions again once I upload it on YouTube to you as well, Heather. And thank you for coming in.
Thank you for having me. Bye.
Bye-bye, guys. Have a good day.
Bye. Thanks, Heather. Thanks for organizing, Avinash.
Pleasure all
Thank
mine.
you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.